Well, my name is Marcus Weaver. I'm 43 years old. I grew up in Virginia, Virginia Beach, and I don't know if you guys know, but next to Texas, Virginia is one of the worst states for death penalty. So growing up, my parents really educated us on civil rights movement, social justice, stuff like that. And so got a lot of material, I know, at a really young age about the inequities that occurred when all white juries were convicting these black men for crimes maybe they didn't commit, or maybe because it was color of their skin. So I developed a hate for death penalty at a young age, not really knowing what it was all about. And then I went to college up in Washington, D.C., and worked at a company called the Nature Conservancy, and I was surrounded by all these liberals, and here I grew up in Virginia Beach was all Republican. So it's like contrast. So I was learning and growing, but during that time period, in the early 90s, it was a hot button issue then, and like it always is. But I remember going to rallies and meeting people and talking about even more inequities it was more about, not necessarily about race, but it was about which lawyer you can afford that could get you off or fight your case. And it was just this discrepancies. And so it was even made me feel better about things, about my position, because I saw that they were starting to do DNA testing, and they realized that a lot of people who were probably executed could have survived possibly, or still be living, or still be part of society if some DNA testing was done. And then kind of ironic, I started getting in trouble. And then once I really got in trouble, I sat down and I read this book, and it was Lazarus and the Hurricane. And I was pretty inspired by that story. Then the movie came out, and I'm glad it came out because it brought light to it. And then, I got out of trouble and became this social justice fighter. But death penalty has always been something that's been near and dear to my heart, and always a cause for, a deep conversation with someone when it really shouldn't be a deep conversation. It's like someone's life, and how do you know for sure? I think if you take someone's life, you have to be 100% sure. And so there I was, bought a ticket for a movie July 19th, went to Aurora Theater. I met a friend I had just met about 3 weeks prior, and she met me at the movie theater after she got off work. Went in, saw the 12:10 Batman showing. I was sitting in the 5th row of the theater, and all of a sudden a smoke bomb went across the room, and the smoke went across. And I looked at my friend, I was like, man, someone's really screwing this movie up. I'm really excited about it. And turns out he started opening fire on the crowd, and you just hear the loud boom, 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 and just constantly for the next, let's say about 6 minutes. And so I got on the ground and just could see the shooter, out of the crack of the seat that was this big in front of me. And I was just like, what am I going to do? And a voice in my head said, when he stops shooting, you get up and leave the theater. And sure enough, he did. And then he started shooting again. And during that ordeal, trying to get out and all that, I was shot in my arm. I got outside the theater, and a little girl comes up to me and says, your arm's bleeding. And so I was like, this is, I can't begin to tell you what types of emotion I was going through, the feelings, all that stuff. And, after, this was when it was current, but the backstory is, the girl I went to the movie theater with, she was shot right there, right next to me in the theater during the first wave of bullets. The seat I was sitting at had about 15 bullets in it. The shooter, when I was standing outside, was on the other side, being apprehended. Nor was when I knew who he was, because the green light from one of his guns was shooting towards the trees. He had premeditated it and everything. And so I was faced with this conflict. It's like Anderson Cooper wanted to interview me, and the first question he asked me was, do you believe in the death penalty? And I said, vengeance is the Lord. Because about 6 years prior, about 8 years prior to, I had given my life to the Lord, and things started changing my life. And even in the Bible, they have certain things that conflict against death penalty, but they have certain things for. Someone was earlier talking about mercy, passion, forgiveness, and all those things. And that's what I was feeling when I said those, because I had lived a life of just anger. But I'm not a death penalty person. But I had something there in that moment in front of all the cameras and all the newspaper stories. it's one of the stories they kept playing. Like, they can't believe this guy who lost a friend in the movie theater, who got shot in the arm, still feels that, that vengeance is the Lord's. Moreover, that I'm not really for the death penalty. And so as the cases progressed, and we met with the DA's office, I'm friends with a lot of the victims. We get together once a month. And early on, the feeling was that they wanted the death penalty. They kept asking me, and I said, well, I'm not sure. I just say vengeance is the Lord. That's my thing, to avoid a meltdown on their half. Why are you on our side? And so it's been something that's been weighing on me. And then when it came time for them to make a decision on the death penalty in the courtroom, the DA's office called us all individually. And of course, we've been talking in little bits and pieces. And it seems that some of my Christian friends who had gotten shot, that I'm friends with, they were like, I don't know what to do. What do you know? I'm like, well, vengeance is the Lord. It's not really up to us. So maybe we should just take ourselves out of the equation. But my whole thing was, I'll do what the other victims want, including Rebecca's mom, I was saying with the girl, including some of my friends who said I would do whatever they want. But as far as I'm concerned, I really feel that he shouldn't get the death penalty. And so I remember the day I went to court that day. And when you go to court, there's a sea of cameras when you come in and a sea of cameras when you leave. It's high security. It's this thing over this one person who went in a theater and made just a huge mistake. Monumental beyond whatever recollection you can think of as a mistake. Well, this is the biggest. And so as I sat in the courtroom, I just kept looking at James Holmes and just saw his face, and it just looked like I know what it's like to sit in that chair. Maybe not do the same thing he did, but the same. It's just like I still felt the same. I felt that he doesn't deserve. He's a human being. Made a huge mistake, but I as a believer, I think there's always room for reconciliation, but if you take that person's life, then there's not, not leaving no room for it. But, there's 12 people who were killed in that theater, so everybody reminds me of that constantly. It's like, don't you have an opinion about it? And so I told the DAs my opinion, but yet the DA goes up, and he announces that the state of Colorado will seek the death penalty. And I remember when he said those words, like my stomach just had this pit in it, and I just sunk. And it was just because a week earlier they were talking, and I got all excited. They were talking about how they might just give him life, and that he wants a plea. He would plead not guilty if he got life. And so I called my wife and I was like, there's a break in the case, they're gonna plead. I was excited because I don't have to go to court anymore, and I don't have to take the stand anymore, and I don't have to it doesn't bother me, but I know it bothers a lot of the victims that we meet with monthly. We have a group, we get together, and it still affects them. There has to be a decision made in a court. A crime has been committed, so there has to be a decision made. And I really thought the state could have took that path, but it was based on what all the other victims said, and there's a lot of people who are still angry. And so, move forward. That day I remember people were cheering on one side. You have the media on one side, and they're looking at our reactions. Well, the person sitting next in front of me was James Holmes' mom and her dad, and she wept. And I just remember man, just the humanity of it all, just the pain, and the fact that the state had an opportunity to close the door on a real dark chapter of our history, but they refused. They took what the victims wanted, and I can understand that too. But to see his mom and to see people, some people were yelling, some people were crying, some people were cheering, and it was just, I don't know, it was very surreal. And so, okay, move forward. They're about to go into the trial. I'm going to be one of the witnesses at the trial. And so they called us and asked, how do you feel about if we just gave them 20 consecutive, or I forget, some crazy amount, 1,000 life sentences or something like that? And I go, I'll be okay with that. So I think the human element is setting in that yeah, a horrible thing's done, but do we need any more bloodshed? Then if you look at the history of the death penalty and all the things involved, and even just in the state of Colorado with all the legal wrangling and all that stuff, it could be 20 years before he even dies anyway. If he doesn't die in prison before, it's goes through all these hoops and whistles and bells and all these things that happen. And so, I mean, people talk about, well, taxpayers' dollars and all that stuff, but I mean, as a person who's been on both sides, been in trouble, got out, helped people, moved on, and all these things, and there's always a chance that like that guy who comes into my office, at a job training program or whatever, who's getting out of prison, or a guy that we're taking out to help pass out flyers, who's homeless now and doesn't know his way, I mean, we have an opportunity to we could grow those people still. There's still an opportunity if they're alive, but when you take a person's life, and so that's going to weigh heavy on me over the course of this next year because I'm going to be responsible, I feel, for if he does that. And I just don't feel that way, but it's glad to see that some of the victims are changing their mind about it, because that's a real serious thing. Like, they don't understand, it's serious, and if he's guilty, of course, but, and I remember when we went to the bathroom and his lawyer was in there. I go, Mr. King, I wish they would have took that plea. And he goes, I wish so too. It's going to be a long trial now. And I go, I know. And see, that's the thing with these death penalties. They might even change the law before he even goes to death penalty. So they might even get what they wanted anyway. So, I don't know. We got a long road ahead with the death penalty, but I think it's a fight worth fighting. So, and I think it's important.